Alright, hello everybody, this is AW. Just want to make a little comment video on our dear and sweet presidential elections primaries going on. So yesterday, Bernie Sanders did a town hall with CNN, and I didn't watch it all, honestly, because I pretty much know what the hell Bernie generally says. There's hardly anything to really watch for. I'm not, it's not that I'm not knowledgeable about what the hell he's on. But anyways, key thing that came out of that, which hopefully doesn't backfire too much on a good old Barney, is he was asked about reparations, and he would not say yes or no. He tried to dodge the question, and I don't think that was a good idea. I don't think that was a good idea at all. For one, look, the neoliberals, like Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, they're openly for reparations. Now, you and I know that they don't actually give a shit. That, if they got into office, they would not deliver anything. That said, the question is now on the table. So, one of the things that Bernie can actually talk about, because, you should be interested in the fact that this question has even come up. That the political years have been falling through the internet and some public opinion, and have realized that in the black community, this is now becoming a talked about topic way more than usual. You should be interested in that if you're a leftist. You should be interested in that if you are anybody who's interested in justice, really. I mean, the whole issue of reparations is nothing but a question of justice. A group of people were exploited as slaves. And by the way, this issue of reparations is not reparations in general. A lot of people want to, particularly liberals, want to bring this up as a question of, well, if we're not talking about reparations, we're going to talk about reparations for everybody. No. This is reparations for American descendants of slaves. This isn't reparations for the rest of the world. It's like when you talk about reparations to Israel or the Jews, you don't suddenly bring in the blacks, you don't bring in the Latinos and the Asians, everybody else. This is a very specific question to the American descendants of slaves community. And if you've never heard that term, American descendants of slaves, well, look into it, because it's a very important distinction. We don't want this is not a question of simply reparations for black people, because yes, the U.S. is responsible for fucking over a lot of people who are black, and they're not all in America. They're not all in the United States. We're talking about specifically reparations for American descendants of slaves here in the U.S. So not everybody who's black in the U.S. should be getting reparations for this kind of thing. It's a very specific set of people. But anyways, a lot of people are trying to dilute this into a question of reparations in general, for reparations for like Native Americans, everybody else. No. It's reparations for black people. It's understandable. It's understandable that Bernie is aware that this is an issue that most people, and I'm not just saying, oh, just white people. No. You have to understand, nobody wants to pay this. Everybody wants to benefit from America, but they don't want to pay any of the debts that the United States owes to anybody. Just let me get my dog out. Let my dog out so he can walk around. Because you look, say, one of the prime arguments, of course, that you've heard is, well, that happened like 300 years ago. Actually, it was what, 250 now? Almost, at most. Slavery ended in about mid 1860s. Yeah, it's about 200 years, slightly more. It's like that was 200 years ago. Black people haven't been slaves since then. And if they haven't gotten back up in society, it's because they're lazy, they're stupid, blah blah blah. The usual. And so people saying like, well, we shouldn't pay for that now. It's not like the people who actually suffered that are here around anymore. So why should we pay like their fucking lazy grandchildren or great 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 grandchildren anything? So that's an immediate, obvious, and fallacious response. Nonetheless, that's the response that you're going to get out of most white people. That's the response you're going to get out of most people who aren't black. You'll get that from Latinos, you'll get that from Asians, you'll get that from everybody. Everybody will complain, why do we have to pay? Well, apparently these people are fucking morons who don't understand that when you become a citizen of a country, you don't just get their benefits, you also get their negatives. You become a U.S. citizen, you owe what the U.S. owes. So, if the U.S. owes American descendants of slaves, then you owe American descendants of slaves. Tough luck. Too bad. That's how it works. You don't complain about, why do I have to pay for this war? Apparently, people don't give a shit when you have to pay for war. They give a shit about when you have to actually help somebody. How dare you, force me to help somebody? I mean, force me to go and pay taxes to fund wars, I wish I didn't have to, but, I'll just do it because I'll go to jail. Well, you know what? If you don't want to pay taxes for reparations, you can go ahead and go to jail too. That's how I see it. So there's that issue, and that issue is not going to be solved, by the way. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it's not going to be solved by having a rational debate. These people are not going to be convinced. Reparations is going to be something that is going to be put forth on the state, federal level, and it's going to be enforced that way. And a lot of people are going to fight it. Too bad, so sad for them. I mean, people don't understand and realize that the money's not a problem. The money is actually the easy thing. It's the easiest thing of all. The hardest thing of all is going to be what has to be done along with that money. Giving American descendants of slaves a pile of cash, and by the way, the pile of cash that they would have to give is in the trillions. Might even be in the tens of trillions. Nobody has done there hasn't been a study funded to do this immense calculation of the total theoretical costs which the American descendants of slaves community has borne ever since, through slavery as well as after slavery. So, the amount of money is huge, but the money is no problem. If you are complaining that, why do I have to pay taxes? You don't, you dumbass. You don't have to pay shit. Learn how money works. Go look up something called modern monetary theory, which is not really a theory. It's just a description of how money works nowadays in a sovereign nation which has control of its own issuing currency. In a country like that, taxes don't pay for anything. Your taxes don't pay for war. Your taxes didn't pay for Wall Street. Your taxes don't pay for infrastructure, nothing. Your taxes only pay for things at your local level. If you pay city taxes, yeah, your taxes pay for stuff that's going on in the city. Federal taxes don't pay for anything. The taxes comes back and they get deleted off the books. The government doesn't function off of your taxes. So that question is completely moot. Don't worry about it. What you will worry about is nonetheless that affirmative action will be necessary, because it's not just money, it's the fact that culturally, on the down low, the American descendants of slaves community is kept out and locked out from any positions of influence in which they can make their own institutional power. So, there are no big black businesses, there are no big black politicians. All these people kowtow to the people who have real power. And the issue of getting these people into real power is going to mean that you, the Latinos, you, the Asians, you, the white people, and it's mostly white people, you're going to have to give up your positions of power. And of course, we all know how that goes. Nobody's going to give anything up. They're going to be forced. And can this actually be forced? That's a question of struggle. That's a question of how much the black community, the American descendants of slaves community, wants to struggle for that, because reparations is going to be a struggle. Reparations is not going to be, well, a bill was passed. No, 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 no. Everybody knows that the bill will be passed, if it passes at all, and everyone will do absolutely everything they can to not follow that law. When Lyndon B. Johnson passed the Civil Rights Act and passed affirmative action laws, they did everything they could to make those laws as weak as possible, and people who didn't want to go with it did everything they could to not carry out the spirit of that law. So that's a major issue. That's huge. Not only that, it's not just a matter of, well, now great, now we have to employ all these Negroes, and like they're lazy, they come from a culture that's disrespectful, blah blah blah, whatever you say. Well, the United States society as a whole, did this to the American descendants of slaves community. And that's not just so, well, maybe. We know they did. We know how they did it. And so now you got to fix it. And it ain't no fix. You have fucked up somebody so deeply that the fix is not going to happen with a law. It's not going to happen with just mere affirmative action in the hiring practices. It's not going to happen merely with attempts to force desegregation, which, by the way, is still de facto here. If you go to black kids go to black schools, white kids go to white schools, and sometimes Hispanic kids go to Hispanic schools, Latinos, and blah blah blah. The U.S. is highly segregated. The whole attempt at desegregation basically died, and it died because the way that the judgment was given by what was it? I forget. I forget what judgment from the Supreme Court was it that ordered the desegregation of schools, but it didn't specify a time frame. It just said as quickly as possible, and as quickly as possible means whenever you feel like it. And most white people, in vast majority, did not feel like it, and they bitched and moaned and cried and protested and did illegal things in order to not have it happen. And so, the whole attempts at integration through, school busing and blah, blah, blah. A lot of places, if they did it at all, did it only for a short while and then quickly afterwards. Where I'm at in California, there's a few places here where there was an attempt to do it. I went to a school which was actually a high up school, high school. At least it was a couple decades ago. By the time I went, it was still one of the better high schools, but it wasn't nationally recognized like it was once. And that school is literally in the middle of the hood. And most of everybody else was bussed in who wasn't black. And those people who were bussed in were people who were part of a magnet program because, they were higher on the academic scale. And so insofar as the school managed to accomplish very much, it accomplished it on the backs of these students which were bused, and the black student population, for the most part, was just kind of left to its own. So that integration thing doesn't fully do much. There's the whole issue of the community in general, and the black community in general has to be helped to be made whole, and that whole project is immense. That is an immense social project. Nobody has any idea, as far as I know, about like how much should be done and what can even be done to get that to a point where we can fix that. We can fix the cultural issues that we've caused. We've destroyed the black families. We've destroyed the general black self-esteem. We destroyed the African American, the American descendants of slaves community spirit, so to say. And how do you fix that? That's a very tough deal, and that is part of reparations. But anyways, Bernie Sanders went on the CNN town hall, was asked about that, and he just tiptoed around that, trying to not mention it because he knows that most people will not like hearing that. But I think that if top cop Kamala Harris could say yes, and everybody knows that she doesn't fucking mean it, and if Elizabeth Warren could say yes, and everybody knows that she doesn't really mean it, and if Cory Booker can say yes, and everybody knows that he doesn't mean it, I think Bernie Sanders could have said yes. And unlike the other ones, who everybody knows that they don't fucking mean it, you can actually look at Bernie Sanders' records and all the things that he says, and even if he doesn't offer any concrete plan, and by the way, that's why he refused to say that he supported or not. He asked, well, what does that mean? When Kamala Harris says, I support reparations, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything. Kamala Harris has no fucking clue what reparations would even be. There's no plan. She hasn't even said, well, we'll launch a study, a federal study, big program to at least see how much it would be, or what kinds of things we would do. She hasn't even said that much. Neither has Elizabeth Warren, by the way. Cory Booker at least has said, well, maybe reparations could be, we could give every black person baby bonds, federal baby bonds. And by the time they're 18, that pays for college, that pays for, some other stuff if they don't go to college, that kind of jazz. That's at least a plan. And it's not much of a plan, by the way. Like, it's pathetic, but it's something. And if Cory Booker can say that, why the hell couldn't Bernie Sanders have just said, okay, yes, I support the idea. Everybody does. You ask anybody who isn't brain dead, and you explain the situation of why reparations matters, and they'll say, okay, I agree, that we should give them something, yeah, there's a lot of shit, even if you don't agree for the slavery thing, by the way, there's a lot of other things that you have to give black people reparations for, American descendants of slaves. The destruction of Black Wall Street, the destruction of black businesses in general, the terrorizing of the black community for so long, the redlining, the keeping them out of the unions in the 1930s, allowing all these other things. All those things are grievances post-slavery, which are significant, highly significant, and would be a significant amount of cash, and would also have required a significant amount of reparations in other modes. So Bernie Sanders should have said, yes, I support the idea. And most people would say, I support the idea. Now, most people would then say, but I don't see how that's possible. Well, don't worry your little head about it. Don't worry about if that's possible. That's not your fucking job. That's a politician's job. That's none of your business. And don't worry whether, it's popular for other people. Everybody knows, I know, black people should know, and it seems to me they most certainly do know, that if this is going to get done, they're going to be the ones who have to push hard. And pushing hard is, maybe there can be a new civil rights movement started, and this time, being done specifically for what it was done before, which is civil rights, reparations for American descendants of slaves. But anyways, that's just my comments on that. I'll be honest, this kind of thing like pisses me off to no end. Um, I just find this to be an issue of one of the greatest injustices in all of history, which is not comparable to anything else we know of in history. And the fact that people on the left, capital L left, as well, don't take this seriously. Everybody's like, oh well, we're just going to have a revolution, and and Bible, it's okay. By the time the revolution comes, we'll just undo all these systematic oppressions, and then we'll treat everybody equally afterwards. Well, the revolution isn't here, and if you're going to wait around for the revolution to help the American descendants of slaves community, you're a fucking idiot. You don't understand how the world works. You don't have any sympathy or compassion for the real suffering of people in the real world. And you're just a fucking idealist dreamer. And maybe that's what you want to be, but, if you're that, then stop calling yourself a leftist. Stop calling yourself a communist, a socialist. Don't call yourself a Marxist, because Karl Marx would be more than spiteful of people like you, because he was no dreamer, and he did not have a faux commitment to justice like you people do. But anyways, this has been Antonio Wolf. See you around.